Good afternoon, friends. I hope I'm audible. Thank you so much. So we are here to discuss very sensitive, concerning situation that has existed in our workplace and in the society for ages. And recent times very predominantly existent, visible in the corporate world and at the workplace. This issue is about racism and discrimination at the workplace, and this is something which we're going to discuss today. Clearly, there is a lack of awareness of unconscious bias, subconscious discrimination, and microaggression. We hesitate to talk about it openly, but a lot of workers in the US have reported discrimination at the workplace. And there's a price that has to be paid for it. A cost tag of more than $150 billion over the last 5 years. This is the price to be paid for cost of turnover due to racism. Loss of productivity last 1 year, cost tagged at $50 billion plus. Clearly a burning issue and needs some discussion and pondering over the whole thing so that we save money and we earn more money. Right? To discuss all of this, very delighted and honored to be in the company of our eminent panelists today. The quick round of introduction. We have Anjali Chatterjee, the CHRO of AirAsia, had long stints in the telecom and in the aviation space. From an India Diversity Forum perspective, she's the Industry Council Chair for the hospitality sector. Welcoming Mamata Banerjee. Mamata Banerjee, the Strategic Initiatives Lead, Cross-Functional D&I Lead for Novartis Healthcare, the Industry Council Chair for the Wellbeing sector. Chandra Balani, welcoming you, the Head of Global Enterprise in Amazon Internet Services, the Industry Council Chair for the tech sector. Welcoming you all. And if I can open the discussion and go to Mamata. Mamata, straight getting into the discussion, there's a disturbing paradox at the workplace today. Organizations are reaping onto the benefits of a large, multicultural, diverse workforce. But at the same time, the countervailing effects of the racism is undermining this whole effort. How do you think we should be addressing this whole issue?
That's a very interesting question. And it's very pertinent because a lot of you, and obviously we heard so much about Black Lives Matter. Somehow in my experience, when we talk of diversity, inclusion, nowadays at least that I'm seeing is talking about gender diversity, we talk of LGBTI community, we talk of PWD. But racism is an unspoken chapter which probably we are not doing enough talking about, right? And if I can go back in time and think about my growing years, where does a child really learn about racism? I heard it first when I was growing up in my neighborhood. Upper caste, lower caste, our history books, the way the entire write-up is presented to children. Is it really a right format to call somebody upper caste or lower caste, and who determines that, right? Why is it that children while growing up are fed all this information, not only through books but also through certain advertisements, right? And we have many such cases, films, we now is the world of blogs and vlogs which children are getting exposed to. It's at a very formative time of growing that people get exposed to the feeling or the thoughts that racism exists. And I would say that there are probably two ways to look at it. One is a long-term goal, which we all as part of this generation owe it to the next generation, is to do something right at the academic level, right? And while we in organizations are trying to understand how many people really understand racism and how is it that we could figure out, it's not different than the other facets of D&I, right? It's just like gender diversity, right? The way we're talking about it. Racism is the same way in which probably many of us are not even aware, which is why learning about our own selves become important, right? What kind of unconscious biases I have. And I remember when I first took the survey of an unconscious bias, I was not even ready to accept that I have these biases. So the second step is about accepting that I have these biases and then positively conditioning myself to be aware and then take necessary steps about it as to how I can work around it. So at one level in the long term is we as parents, as caregivers, as probably nephews, nieces that we have in our families, to really try and help them get there as to why racism is wrong, right? And that is the long-term perspective. The short term in which we exist today in the organizations, while we talk about unconscious bias training, many of the questions are not really covering the bigger ambit of racism so much so, right? And that is a place to look at, that is a place to work at. And once you have learned about yourself, once you have accepted it, it's about making those positive conditioning. So I would think these are the short-term and long-term aspects of it, and this is how we could look at it. But there are many, many different ways, I'm sure, which my eminent panelists can also add to. But in my perspective, we have to work both ways, getting the right mindset in our children, the next generation, and second, how do we train ourselves to do the right thing?
Beautiful. I'm just taking a cue from your response, Mamata. You spoke about awareness of unconscious bias. And if I may come to you, Anjali, this is tackling a problem and a solution to this whole problem. But also addressing the problem at the root, right? We're talking about lack of awareness of unconscious bias, microaggressions, subconscious discrimination. In your mind, Anjali, what do you think organizations, enterprises should be really doing to overcome all of this?
Yeah, thank you. So as she says, racism is a deep-rooted social issue, right?
Right.
And it's like global, and in India it is much more than what we would like to accept.
Absolutely.
Right? And while here, we're not here to really solve the world hunger. I think in organizations there's a lot we can do. So in organizations, we're already addressing various issues. We're having POSH policies, we're having gender diversity policies, we talk about unconscious bias. I think, you know, so far, as she said, in organizations, we haven't really spoken about racism. It's very under the radar, right? It's there, but it's under the radar. I think at organizations, what it's starting to do now is talk about it, right? In the trainings, and you know, while training, we say everything cannot be solved by training, but I have learned every so far through training, right? So bring in the topic of racial discrimination in our unconscious bias, in our trainings, and most importantly, bring it at leadership conversations which we have. So leaders address people, and it's a very tricky conversation to have because most of us do not like to talk about it because it's so sensitive, but I think we have to really find the right verbiage to speak about it in a way which is very sensitive to everybody, right? So the leadership conversations, and also when you have reverse conversations with people, right? So that's one. But I think the other important thing is to also open up where, you know, avenues for people who are concerned or who feel discriminated basis racism to come up and talk about it, right? And one of the things we have done is we have a lot of peer counseling. So we can reach out to a few people. But I think once you talk about it, open up for conversations, open up the avenue that, okay, there has been discrimination based on my race, becomes really, really important. I think that's what we would really bring it out in the open. It's not brought up in the open, and that's a little bit of a challenge over here.
Right. It's a good aspect because you're saying that things are being done in the firm, but there are a lot of places where things are not really done the way that should be done. And I'll come back to you on that particular aspect. But talking about inclusion at the workplace, Chandra, if I may come to you. The topic is about race, which has an intersection point with inclusion at the workplace. It means that we are all level at, equal access to opportunities and resources to be successful at the workplace, right? Chandra, if you can share examples in your firm, how you have been able to drive and make things very inclusive in your workplace. I'm sure there are actions which had to be kept in check or actions which had to be rewarded. Your perspective.
Sure, and in case you were listening carefully, my title does not have HR, right? And that's a feature, not a bug. All right, so, I lead the inclusion diversity initiatives at Amazon Internet Services for AWS in India. And before I come to the how part of it, I want to address the why part of it one more time from an Amazon and AWS perspective, right? At Amazon, you know, our mission is to be world's most customer-centric organization. Our mission is to be the world's best employer, right? And the work that we do around inclusion, diversity, and equity is central to that theme, right? We create a culture of innovation where we are innovating on behalf of our customers. And we believe that having a diverse team help us think bigger, think differently, and creating products and services for our customers, right? And that is reinforced in our leadership principles. So at Amazon, we have 16 leadership principles. We don't micromanage people. We treat them all as leaders, and we give them leadership principles as guidelines for them to make their decisions, right? And some of the leadership principles, remind team members to seek diverse perspectives in their decision making, where we learn from each other and then we constantly earn others' trust, right? We believe that our products are better, our teams are stronger when they include diverse perspectives as well as experiences, right? So to that effect, we constantly run initiatives on improving diversity, inclusion, and equity. We've made our diversity numbers at a global level public. So if you go to amazon.com/diversity, you have diversity numbers made available publicly. We run multiple initiatives for improving inclusion, and starting with an employee survey that we do. So there is a daily pop-up question that comes as soon as you open a laptop, which is not just on diversity and inclusion. It's basically to see how you are feeling on a daily basis, right? And that includes job satisfaction, manager satisfaction as big categories, and then also it carries a inclusion sentiment tracker based on how you're feeling. And at each level, at manager and above, and to that leaders, multiple businesses, you can track the inclusion sentiment score, right? So you can measure the diversity numbers, you can track the inclusion sentiment scores, and then we as an organization believe that good intentions don't affect change, and we bring in mechanisms for driving that, and we use a data-driven approach. So we look at numbers around hiring, around retention, around promoting, and see if there is any bias coming in, if there are any lopsided numbers coming from some demographies, right? And then if there are any, we take action in terms of improving that. We basically look at these scores and see which leaders are doing well and which are not, and then bring in cross-leveraging and some of those best practices, right? Including pay parity. So Amazon signed up the White House pay pledge for equal pay in 2016, and constantly over the years we've been publishing those numbers. Those are available as of now as well, but glad to call out the last year our numbers for women for similar roles, including bonus pay and all of that, was 99.6%, right? A couple of years ago it was 101%. So it's in that range that we've been constantly working. We've been putting efforts to improve our diversity around women as well as minorities in US on increasing our diversity. We also have rewards and mechanisms wherein each business is being tracked, and they run initiatives, and then they bring in their best practices on a quarterly reward mechanism. So multiple initiatives, but still journey is on. We are learning every day and improving every day.
Fabulous. You mentioned about bias, Chandra. I'll come back to you on that.
Sure.
I have a question around it. But Anjali, circle back to you. You spoke about good things happening in certain ecosystems, right? But as an example, people are hesitant to talk about racism at the workplace, even today. Why is it so?
Yeah, I think, and I'll take an example of us and our leaders, right? It is a sensitive topic, right? It is a very sensitive topic. And I'm not getting the US and Black Lives Matter, I'm talking India itself.
Right.
And I think most of the time, because it's so sensitive, people don't like to talk about it. So that's one. But how do you evolve around it, right? So for example, how do you remove all the biases of race at hiring phase? How do you remove the biases at key junctions? So it's very difficult to train completely, but what sort of conversations you have during hiring, what sort of conversation you have during appraisal time, what sort of conversation do you have during quarterly review times? these are the way we try to train our leaders and our managers to start having those conversations. The other thing is, and this all, you know, some leaders still are very open to talk about it, some are still shy to talk about it.
Right.
Then you have other opportunities. Okay, do you have any key projects going, right? Why don't you give it to somebody who you think, you know, is from a place which is under, you know, rated. So why don't you bring them up? What about the performance? What are the potential of these people? So we start bringing in those conversations during key times of the year, so that, you know, the managers and leaders start feeling a little more comfortable talking about it.
Absolutely.
Of what they're doing and what they're not doing and how they can do it better. And then they ask, okay, what can I do? How can I bring this up, right? Or sometimes, you know, when there's some crisis going on, some certain parts of India, then let's talk about it. How do we feel about it? How can we support you?
Yeah.
So I think starting those conversations, having those conversations becomes very, very important in such cases. And how do you train, not just train, but give managers some certain, you know, guidelines of what to talk about, you know. And we also have theatre-based, role-based workshops, because it cannot be just training on a, you know, online training or just sitting in a classroom. So I think role-based workshops really help, and it helps you to get out of that barrier, because you've practiced it once, you know, and practice it twice for a role play, you're more likely to get it done. So I think that's what we try to do. We keep giving them ideas, you know, speeches, and what sort of things to say, even if someone's doing well or not doing well. How do you bring that up? So, and we do that on a continuous basis. So that, along with the conversations we have, and also giving some underrepresented communities some key projects to do, becomes really important. And, you know, and once a project is good, how do you really showcase that?
These are wonderful examples of sustainability. I think these are successful organizations that we see on the podium today. Talking about workshops, and if I can go back to Mamata, you know, sensitization workshops, learning interventions, seminars, post-workshop engagements, do you really think that can impact behavioral change? I mean, what is it that we need to change or we bring about change of the whole perspective around diversity? Your thoughts?
Let me go back to where I was talking about positive reconditioning, right? You know, it's in the age in single-digit numbers when suddenly women start, or rather girls start losing confidence as compared to men, and many surveys have shown that, right? It's a similar case with race as well, right? When a child is growing up at home and what he, she or they are hearing, right? And the way it breaks the confidence in them, and they start thinking, oh, I'm from, you know, maybe, you know, community which is not the upper caste, as I was mentioning. It takes a lot of time, effort, and I would say focused attention, with a lot of, I would say, experiential training programs to get there. And I totally believe that trainings help a lot.
Yeah.
Because of the sheer fact that I was talking about, that we see there's a momentum in the industry about unconscious bias. The last 2-3 years, it's just, you know, the buzzword everywhere. All companies, you know, in their own ways are trying to ensure that employees understand that they have unconscious biases. And if we are to do these trainings more in an experienced place, you know, really people coming and feeling the lives of these people, and that really I've seen through dramatics, through very different communication channels, that we could really bring in a lot of change. Earlier I remember when I used to sit, and in a lot of cases I have been the only woman coming from manufacturing operations background, only woman in the room, and it so happened that over a period of time, always it used to be, oh, it's woman in business, it's D&I, it's a woman thing. That has started changing. There are so many male allies now that we see, right? So that mindset change takes time, but I'm 100% sure that if we do the programs right, and if we do it on a continual basis and we measure them right, there can be immense impact. And the best way to make that impact is a person to make them feel what really a person of a certain community feels, make them tread that path in that format, in the training format, if you may. And I do understand always we can't do that. We have online formats, we have virtual formats as well. But I have seen majority impact coming from these experiential learning programs, which many companies and have started now doing for companies, so that these employees can go through those training programs and they understand what really is it to feel like a woman, what is it to really feel like a person from the LGBTI community, or say a person with disability, or in this case racism. So my personal take is, it's not one size fits all. You can't treat the training programs like that, and most of the cases that's what companies do, because it's the the easier way to do it. But I would say that more and more, if we curate it in the right way, basis whom you're training, that will be very, very impactful.
Very well said, Mamata, and I completely agree with you. I want to give an example here. Philadelphia police, Starbucks store, the manager is very proactive, and this is on a very sarcastic note. He called up the police, and the police arrives in the store because he's reported two black, sorry I'm using the word black here, two black patrons in the store. They were reported for trespassing. And the fact of the matter is that they were waiting for a friend to join them at the store. And incidentally, they were arrested by the police. Obviously, there was a lot of hue and cry, a lot of tension. And Starbucks, coming to your response, Mamata, Starbucks decided to close its stores for one day. One day there was no store which was open in Starbucks. These sensitization programs, learning seminars were done throughout the day across stores, maybe in Philadelphia and even beyond Philadelphia. I think there's a clear case and a need to foster empathy in the workplace today, and I completely second to what you're saying. The next question is a very important question, because it is about our country. And I want a response from each one of you, but I'll go to Chandra first with your permission, and then I'll take Mamata your perspective, and Anjali your perspective too. Right from our childhood, we have had our own perceptions around the environment, what we hear, see. Some countries in the world extremely racist. I mean, you put your foot on the soil and racism begins from that point onwards, right? And we say, oh God, this country, racist, racist, racist. And India, we are victims of racism? Really? How do you rank India when it comes to racism and the mindset that we have in India, in our country?
So I think there are pluses and minuses, right? And talking about negatives first, I think we've been sufferers, right? Racism, I mean, without getting into details, but we see racism with skin color, right? Gora Chitta versus Kallu, Kala, right? The fairness creams are making a business out of that. You've seen racism calling Northeastern people as Chinkies, right? Treating South Indians as Madrasis, right? So many elements, including foreign people, right? White skinned foreigners are all welcome. The moment you have a black, there is a tag, okay, something negative tag out there, right? So we've had our share, and if you still don't believe me, if you think it's not happening today, go look at the matrimonial ads, right? Even though you might not be looking, but just go look and see what they are talking and what they are seeking, right? And you'll see the racism out there. I think there needs to be a mindset change, right? Where India is such a diverse country, right? Across languages, across culture, food, and the way we have been growing from various places, languages, right? The mindset needs to change, wherein we look at diversity as a plus point, right? If we are all same, right, it's just 1 + 1 is 2. Only when we are diverse, where 1 + 1 can become greater than 2, wherein we are learning from each other and picking up things that others are doing better than us, right? Yeah. And I think there are some pluses as well. And so US, as we know, is celebrating first woman vice president with Kamala Harris out there. But we've had our fantastic leaders, right? Right from 1963, Sucheta Kriplani, we had our first CM. 1966, Indira Gandhi ji, we are our first Prime Minister. 2007, Pratibha Patil ji, our first President. And we have so many women leaders out there in prominent places who are making an impact on the structural racism, right, at the policy level, right? And all of you leaders out there in this room, right, in your organization, you can make an impact in making those policy changes, small changes, but has a much bigger impact. And I'm happy to report that my manager is a woman leader. In my leadership team, I have more women than men. They bring in those diverse perspectives, and that's how we improve as an organization, as a country.
Fabulous. Fabulous. Mamata, your perspective.
Let me start by relating a small story which happened with me probably 10 years back. So this is the time when, I had gone to meet one of my friends at his medical college in Bhagalpur. I was stunned to see that there were different dining tables for different caste people, right? There were teachers, the professors who would come, and the favoritism, and this is obviously heard from them, the favoritism would align with similar caste people, right? And the so-called higher caste people will not sit with the lower caste people. And I've stayed in almost 11 cities now in India. I would say north is very different than south, west is very different than east. And in a group of people, leaders amongst ourselves, we are talking of we don't get enough D&I. From a race perspective, I don't see that that should be a challenge in our country at least, right? Howsoever, there are instances, and if you all have seen the very, very sensitive movie, Article 15, it also narrated the big holes in our society's mindset. And as he said, I completely agree with Chandra that this mindset needs to change, right? One of the things which I have seen few companies have successfully done and is helpful is just removing the names from the CVs, removing, why do we need the names, right? It solves the problems at multiple levels, right? If you just remove the names, you wouldn't know it's a man or a woman, you wouldn't know what's the caste of a person, and whether or not we agree, there are many ways in which we are conditioned to think in a certain way, right? And that's what we are humans, right? So I would think that as a country, India is very diverse, it's a plural society. There's a huge diversity which we can leverage in the positive way. However, there are many, many sects of the society today who are suffering, who are probably feeling as bad as many other diverse groups because of the way they've been treated while growing up, and even now, the way they are being treated as we speak. And if we get our directives right, if we take the journey right, we could bring about this change. And if I may just add to this, and probably it is more of the MNC global operations centers kind of formats that we are seeing today, that we have such different policies across countries. I mean, the same company is probably giving a different kind of benefits to somebody sitting in Europe versus in India. And we all are just okay with it as Indians. Our leaders are just okay with it as Indians. And I somehow feel that that needs to change. If I am an Indian and I'm in a critical role, which people probably still believe that, oh, it's an Indian role, is it? Oh, is it a critical role? Is it a global role? And those are the questions that we face. That needs to change. And we need to look at a holistic package even for employees who are working from India and bring them to the same level as others who are working probably in the West.
Yeah, and the consumption of fairness creams will only go up from here. It's already a $1 billion market in our country. I'll go to Anjali in a minute, and then we'll just see if we have time to open up the session for all of you. If we have time to take a couple of questions. Anjali, your response.
Yeah, just to answer your question, like as we said, we as Indians are victims of discrimination across the world, and we know that, right? Yeah. And but coming to India, I think we as Indians are extremely highly racist. I'm sorry to say, but we are, right? Like I get all the time, which part of the country are you, where do you stay, and et cetera, et cetera. And I said, this is a deep-rooted social issue, and there's lots you can do, and hopefully, the next gen, our children growing up will really get out of it. But in organizations, as you said, we, AirAsia being part of the Tata group, there are lots of work happening with sustainability. And in my previous Tata organization, we had this whole process of masking CVs. So when the CVs would come to a manager, the names are masked, the college, which college, with the college of women, their religion, their caste, their creed, everything has to get masked, and only the skills and competencies there, because we're hiring for skills and competencies. So we continue training the manager on competency-based hiring without asking personal questions, right? How to avoid personal questions, and they get the CV. So they don't know. They say there's XYZ, and these are skills you want to select, right? And obviously during the actual interview time, you will probably, the person will get to know, just because man and woman. In fact, we tell them not to discuss any personal things beyond competencies, right? So at that point, most of the other discrimination factors move away, except for whether it's a woman or man, and obviously we track that. So that becomes very important, and of course the matrix is happening very important. And again, as I said, at organizations, we focusing on professional conversation. I think that's the only thing, because once you enter a personal space, right, how far do you go when you speak on a personal space? Yeah. And I think obviously we are moving the needle to the other extreme, right? You're saying you need to have personal conversations to get that rapport. Yeah, but at what level? Yeah. So a lot of it again goes to training, but I think in the country I think we'll be down in the level of racism right down, but I think the social mindset to change, hopefully with our children. But I think in organizations, once we start these conversations, you can see actual changes happening, quarter on quarter.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So that's the answer to it.
Chandra wanted to say.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, I think we need to go one step backwards. Even in our job descriptions, right? You look at some of the job descriptions, looking for a aggressive salesperson, fire in the belly, rock star. He should come with 15 years of experience in the industry, right? The moment you have a job description like that, how many women will apply, right? So I think it needs to start there. So at Amazon, we have made neutral language, not just language, but the content out there as well. Yeah. Not only on job descriptions, but also we have removed all the racially insensitive language in our technical documentation, in our code. We put mechanisms that no additional language comes into our code. So I think if we have such language, and then we have 10 people who are applying, and 9 out of that are men, and then we complain that women are not applying, right? So we need to put some effort, to ensure that we have a diverse funnel, top of the line funnel, right? If we have a diverse funnel, I think that's where our job is half done. Then we will ensure that on talent, on merit, we are able to bring in our diversity in our organization.
Fabulous. Thank you so much, Chandra, Mamata, Anjali, for being fabulous panelists for us. I'm sure we've had great takeaways during this short, brief session we had. I believe we had more time, we would have discussed more things in detail. But talent custodians in the room, I'm sure we'll have a lot of takeaways to go back and start implementing those best practices, sustainable behaviors, and take baby steps towards creating a magical workplace that we belong to.